We're going to move on to the guard, who I think is going to play guard, Nick Broker, 7th round pick. It's interesting when you look at his bio on the website for Ole Miss. He's a Kent Hull Trophy winner, which is the best offensive lineman in Mississippi football, voted on by former coaches, players, and scouts. Obviously, you guys know who Kent Hull is. And this was an award that has been won by guys like Charles Cross from Mississippi State, Gabe Jackson, Laramie Tunzel, Elton Jenkins. So some really good offensive linemen. This guy is 6'4", 305 pounds, 32.5-inch arm length. Played in 48 games. First few years, he was a left tackle, and then he became a left guard, which I think, given his measurables, his length and size, I do think that's where he ends up.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's even a couple games in the 2022 season where they've got some injuries at tackle, and he pops out the left tackle, and you just see, some athleticism pieces as well, but it's really that size and arm length. Like, he's limited even at the college level, so it's going to be even more limiting for him at the NFL level. And then so you take the frame and the physical measurables, and you want to kick him into guard already. And then you see the intelligence and the functional ability and technique that he performs with on the interior. And this was a good value, I thought, in the 7th round. I'm never going to complain at drafting somebody for the trenches ever. Like, you can always restock that pipeline. But you got a guy who is good between the ears and good from a technique standpoint. Granted, there seems to be a bit of a log jam now at guard, but watching the tape, I was more impressed with him than I thought I was going to be.
I agree, man. He was fun. As you said, you see the intelligence, you see the processing, whether it's a run or a pass. We're going to show you some of that too. But again, I come back to a firm pocket and anchoring and why this guy is also a Kromer guy. He's very good he understands his body positioning and opportunities when those opportunities arise to widen a running lane or a passing lane, or to, again, just get right down the cylinder. We always talk about pass blocking and using that offensive lineman staying in between the pass rusher and the quarterback. And he's very good at, drawing that cylinder right down the middle of the guy and staying down that middle line. And if he doesn't initially, he gets to it late, as we'll show you again. His processing is really good, man. I was very surprised by it. His intelligence and his processing. And so let's get into some of this film, because it's actually very, very fun. So again, left guard. So he's number 64 right here. And you're going to see on this one, this is that recognition, that processing. You see 40 coming inside, but initially Broker is looking out to Drew Sanders right there. So watch him. You can see him go through his process. He's stepping inside, and he sees 40 coming to him. He's like, all right, I need to take him. Obviously, Sanders is moving on to someone else. He takes him and turns him just enough so that the running back can hit that lane. That's very good processing, again, in the blink of an eye as the ball is snapped.
Yeah, you see him regularly execute his responsibilities, adjust on the fly. Again, like, and it's not to say this because he's not the most, physically imposing or impressive guy. He's good between the ears. Like, you don't start for 3 years and be able to move positions in your final year if you don't have some sort of high functional football IQ, and he does. And you see the mental adjustment on this rep, and then you see the hand fit. He gets it inside on 40 there, drives him, turns him, occupies him. You see that, regular technicality from him and his ability to execute, with a combination of technique and leverage. Again, he's not the biggest, not the strongest guy, not the most powerful, but he can turn and move guys because he plays with leverage and understands how to pair it with his technique.
And here's one of those processing plays post snap where, again, he's kicking out, looking at 40. That guy's running away, so he pinches inside. He has power step. That's what he's really good at. Power steps, stays square, and this is his guy now. What's he do? He, again, escorts him out of the club. And now the quarterback has a pocket. He does leave that pocket, but again, processing pre to post snap, who the threat is, and then just locking onto that threat and riding him wide.
Yeah, it's a good adjustment, and not necessarily the easiest one. It's definitely not as easy as Broker makes it look on this one. Like, you've got a dude coming from the second level, beelining it for that quarterback and coming down the barrel in a hurry. You've got to adjust. And I like how he gets that inside hand. He gets it right into the chest, and then he takes that left hand, gets it right up into kind of like the armpit area. It's a good hand placement technique. And like you said, he just rides him and escorts him out the play. Yeah. And like, this is, again, for somebody who I knew wasn't the most athletic, to have the foot speed and the athleticism to connect, and then consistent pitter patter in those feet. Like, once he makes contact, he just keeps driving. There's no stalling. There's no momentum change. Just rides him right out.
Yeah, here's one versus LSU. Oof. Firm pocket, right? So this nose tackle is slanting outside into the B gap there, and watch him again latch on, and then the body positioning. Watch how he gets his feet and his body in between himself right there. That's over. That's over. Ball's getting out. That type of body positioning. I had to look up if this guy was a wrestler. Like, that's how good he is with his body positioning. I couldn't find anything, but it just looked like a guy that understands his body and that spatial awareness and what it takes to, again, keep the pass rusher away from the spot of the quarterback in the pocket.
That subtle little turn that you hinted at, like at the end there, just that little ability to be like, you know what? Guy maybe is getting inside a little bit. Bang, right there. Let me just turn. Let me drop that right foot, put it in the dirt, pivot, turn my man. Again, just it's sometimes not the prettiest or the most overly complicated thing. Just keep your body in between you and the defender. Like that's, or keep yourself between the quarterback and the defender. Like that's it. And that little turn at the end to have the functional technique and strength to do it, but more so the awareness in that rep to start feeling what's going on and then be like, no, and turn a little bit and keep his body in between. Real nice play.
Yeah, and here's another one where he's anchoring, extending on this one. He gets good hand placement on this one, and then you see him lock out right there. And then, again, just firm pocket. Look at the quarterback. Quarterback has all day back there off of play action. Another really good rep where he's able to anchor a little more power in his upper body here, but you can see him lifting that guy up again and just anchoring down, being firm in that pass protection so the ball can get out.
Firm is a good way to put it, and at 6'4", and a little bit of change, and 305 pounds, like he's got that ability to neutralize and cancel out, dudes from the second defender or from the second level or guys who are a little bit on that undersized piece. And you see it on this one, like his ability to just drive him into the dirt. Again, I knew he wasn't the biggest or the strongest or the fastest or most athletic, but I just kept coming away impressed with, some of his strength or some of his athleticism. And I think it's really tied to his understanding and his technique and his ability to play with leverage, even though he's not the biggest or strongest or most athletic guy. And you see it on that one too.
Yeah. And the thing with anchoring, it's, sometimes guys want to finish near the line of scrimmage. And so they're going to anchor, they're going to lock down. You saw Torrence do a lot of that near the line of scrimmage. Well, football's difficult, all right? It's not, you're not going to win every rep. Every rep's not going to be perfect. Every rep's not going to be technical. Well, this one, you can see it's like a four-man slide, and the Bills do this a lot, and we saw a lot of issues with Saffold, especially in that Bengals game where they're locking the tackle and they're four-man sliding to one side, which makes this guard, which, again, this was Saffold struggling last year, it makes this guy more of like a pivot guy, because really, if you think about it, all these guys are sliding to the right. So he's got to account for this gap right here, but also this gap right here. So this guy really has a two-way go. He could go outside. He could go inside, right? And so this is very difficult for a guard. So initially, that guy's slanting inside. So you get a power step. We call this a power step, where he takes that hard, square step down the line of scrimmage, stay as square as you can, hold the firmness of the interior of the pocket right there. He does that very good. But you can see, he's not quite down the cylinder of the body of that pass rusher quite yet. So he's still working there, but he got that inside hand outside, but you see that pass rusher knock it away. So now he just refits it out there, but then look right there. Now he's in perfect position. And yes, the pocket is collapsing on the quarterback, but watch what Broker does. Boom, locks out. It's over. It's over. And so again, the play is not always going to be pretty. The technique's not always going to be perfect, but the process to get to where he did, we call this, instead of just anchoring, this is called anchor recovery. He's able to recover on this, again, very difficult pass protection. He's able to recover and lock down and anchor down at the doorstep of the quarterback, and the quarterback is still able to throw the ball. Unfortunately, he's not able to complete it to the wide open receiver.
Oh, and that wide open receiver was one of my loves, Jonathan Mingo. Godspeed to you in Carolina, Mr. Mingo. This one is, I love what you talked about that recovery piece. It was one of the things we talked about with Peter Skoronski. Like you're not going to win every rep, especially initially. Like your initial plan might not work. You might think, you know what? I got this guy set up. I'm going to put my hand here. Everything's going to work. And then all of a sudden that defender chops it and you've only got one hand and you're like, uh-oh, what do I do? How do you recover in that moment? He starts to lose this rep. His hands are outside the frame of the defensive tackle. Like you talked about, he's not in like great position. He's not really in that cylinder of the defensive tackle like you talked about. So when you're losing that rep, you're on, your heels there. What do you do? His ability to sink. Look at where he gets his toes into the ground. He kind of arches back a little bit and kind of wrenches back. You see some of that strength, and then you see where the hands are. You see the ability to recognize and adjust in the moment and go, uh-oh, I'm in a little bit of trouble here. And he salvages the rep. Again, not as ideal as you like because he does get driven back a bit, but at the end of the day, he's able to withstand what's going on. He's able to anchor and stalemate and kind of win. And that defender is going to be pissed off because he had a big advantage and he lost it as the rep went on. So that's a good recovery from Broker there, and not an easy one either.
Yeah, no, he surprised me when I watched his film. He's not a guy that I got to before the draft, but once the draft was over, to watch his film, I was impressed. And I'm excited because he's a guy that if he can somehow stick, if he can somehow compete with some of the offensive linemen and depth that the Bills have, maybe that makes someone else expendable, right? Maybe that allows Bean to flip one of these guys for a late round draft pick, which you've heard some of that talk about guys, piling late round draft picks because a lot of the undrafted money is getting higher than some of the actual picks at the end of the draft. Bean obviously has 10 picks now.
Yep.
So maybe he can get a decent pick for an offensive lineman because Broker is a Kromer guy. And, he does compete enough to allow Bean to do something like that.
Yeah, those late round picks can be valuable with how the, UDFA money is turning a little bit and on the rise in terms of its, financial trajectory. And also just from a trade up ammo standpoint, Bean even talked about that, right? Like the ability to move up, let's say in a third round or a second round, it might cost you, a 6 or 2 or a couple of those late round picks, or maybe it costs you a 4th and a 5th, but because you got more picks on the back end, and if you have a strong roster, you're okay just, giving up some of those picks. So it just gives you more options. It gives you, more pliability and more fluidity in your strategy. And Bean has been, he got like a 6th for Daryl Johnson a couple years ago. Like he is really adept at having a position of strength on the roster and not just, cutting it down and not getting anything for it. Like, and if you can get anything, even if it, Broker was a 7th round pick, if he sticks and you trade one of your other depth guys at that position for a 6th or a 5th, that's a huge win.
Huge.
You got a guy on the roster and you got to pick, ahead of where he was taken. Like you said, huge. That's good value. And again, I think there is legitimate potential. I know he's a 7th round pick, but this isn't a 7th round pick that was, whatever, we'll take him. Some people had a 5th round grade on him. I think he has an opportunity to compete and potentially stick, even though, again, like we talked about, interior offensive line and guard specifically does have a bit of a logjam.